Mike, I've just been feeling like a little anxious about having peace and serenity in my life. I mean, it just kind of feels counterintuitive that I'm having success and I'm doing well with my food and I'm minimizing my human doing and working more on human being and everything's going well. And I'm just a little anxious and nervous about the peace and serenity that are in my life right now.
You're using the right word, Dr. Cammy. Counterintuitive. People complain about this all the time, and they get a little bit of success, they get a little time under their belt, and they're off the roller coaster. Blows blood sugar, dopamine, ups and downs, and just general peace. You have more time. You have less uh, active thoughts of when you're eating sugar and when you're eating food and when you're this and when you're that, and you're not negotiating with yourself back and forth. And it just feels weird. I've always been a fan of the people who in this situation are more used to the devil they know than the devil they don't. And you're right there with the devil you don't. You got to get used to.
Yeah, so apropos. Welcome to another episode of Dr. Cammy Goes Keto, where I'm here with Mike Collins, the sugar-free man, and sugardetox.com, and we hang out over at No Sugar Nation in the school platform, SKOOL. And you can go there and find us under No Sugar Nation. We have community support and group meetings and all kinds of wonderful stuff to help keep us off with sugar. Mike has a 30-day challenge there that you can sign up for. And yeah, so I'm doing the deal and it is just feeling like a new normal. Nikki and I actually just did a video on like a new normal, and it's a little like I'm almost feeling like a letdown, like, wow, like this is how the rest of my life is going to be.
Yeah. Look, I mean, again, it's super common. I think I've said this stat on this show before, but it's in 12 steps and in regular recovery. If somebody doesn't go to the 12 steps, they get off drugs and alcohol. The relapse rate between 360 and 365 days just before they get to a year is astronomical because of the same reason. People don't see themselves as a person who's changed. And I read this, or I think I had it as a meme the other day, as like, you're not like changing your diet. You're not changing what you eat. You're not changing what you ingest. You're changing your identity, right? You're changing who you are in the world, like how you handle stress, how you handle, you know, old things. And you've done it for decades, and it's got bound to feel strange or different, right? And it look at one of the things about a lot of people know this, but it bears repeating, is that that stuff worked for you, right? You lost a child, you had a busy life, and you had a lot of chaos up and downs all the way back to your childhood, and sugar worked to soothe you, right? Now you don't have that. You've got to get a lot of other newer, different things that does the same thing because the life didn't change, the stress didn't change, the work didn't change. You're still having to deal with everyday stresses and strains, but this is a one thing you can't use anymore. You have to change it, and change feels weird, especially in this place. So don't beat yourself up about it. You kind of got to lean into. I hate that phrase. I hate that phrase. You got to lean into it a little bit.
It's such a good phrase though, because it does describe, it's kind of like you imagine like leaning into a big windy storm or something, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like you got to kind of put your body and soul and heart into it and, lean into that physically. And here, it's like emotionally and mentally and spiritually and everything else too. You
yeah,
got to lean into that change and that adjustment and be, okay with it.
yeah, yeah. That's it. I mean, you got to come with, or what do you call? You got to deal with come with may. Whatever the emotion is, whatever the feeling of boredom. I think you had mentioned this before we came on. You didn't quite phrase it that same way, but the feeling of this is boring. You like, and you also, I think you said that just now. You said, "Is this how the rest of my life is going to go?" You're like, "Wait a minute." I used to have to always have a negotiation with the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, saying, what time am I going to eat? What's for dinner? Oh, I can't have that much. Oh, I can't buy that. I can't pull into that store. I can't pull into that convenience store. I can't pull into that fast food restaurant. Like you were just used to this chatter, this capture, this, and the right word is hijack of your brain. Your brain was hijacked. Your decision making was
Totally.
your emotions were hijacked. Your feelings were hijacked. Yeah.
Totally, and I did that every 2 to 3 weeks. I was binging every 2 to 3 weeks, and so, my body would say, I'd say, "You can't do that, you can't do that," and then finally, after 2 or 3 weeks, I'd say, "F it." I'd get the F it, and I would just go and be off and running.
Right.
And so it was such a roller coaster, and it was such an emotional roller coaster, and a waiting for it to come. Like, I'm going to get relief, and I'm going to get to plan, and I'm going to get to sneak, and I'm going to get to hide, and I'm going to get to eat all the sparkly, pretty, fancy, crinkly stuff. And, yeah. And it's all gone.
Right. You mentioned a good part. You called me yesterday, texted me yesterday, and you're having some ups and downs yesterday, like a regular life situation. And you can tell the folks about it, but you know, we always said if you get to F it, if you get to the point where you're like, screw it, this is it, whatever. If that phrase raises its head, that you should reach out and whatever. So, and that's when you're bored or when you're calm or when you're peaceful, you're not going to be saying that stuff. You're not going to be like frustrated beyond belief. And honestly, these are things that as an adult, and this is important, as an adult, you never really dealt with any other way. You may have added to eating sugar and flour to it. You may have done some exercise. You may have, taken some whatever, some antidepressant. You may have done other things, but you always had, in addition to, you had the sugar, you had the flour, you had that eating a lot kind of thing or whatever.
Like in your back pocket.
Yeah, yeah. There's always, if it's way too much, then you're gonna, and again, here's the important part. It worked. Notice the acceptance level of the emotional eating gurus and books out there, right? People realize this is what's happened. Sometimes, not always. They realize this is what happened to them, and then they try and get relief from it. Except, as I've said many times, the emotional eating solutions out there seemingly contain the ability to moderate. But in our work, that you can't moderate. For some people, you can't moderate it. And you need to get 6 months or a year in so that you can heal up and then not think about it for a time period and see what the behavioral change that we're discussing since the beginning of the show here is like in your life with other different ways to soothe yourself emotionally.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did in my life this summer was kind of take the summer off of pushing myself to be doing anything like making some money or proving to the world that like I have purpose or things like that. I just took the summer off and finished my certification to become a metabolic health practitioner. And I'm not pursuing that until the fall or maybe even into the winter. So I took the summer off and I have very little, I still have a pretty busy calendar, but
Right.
it's less busy. And so I have free time on my hands. And I did that intentionally because I wanted to learn. I wanted to do exactly what I'm doing, which is learn how to manage free time, peace, calm. I'm doing more meditation. I'm doing more yoga. I'm doing more, resting during the day and more reading of some of my books. And yeah, the counterpart to all of those good things that I'm doing is that I'm sitting around bored. And I have to tell you that honestly, one of the things that I'm doing is thinking about food a
Mhm.
lot. And that lets me know that I'm still early on in my recovery program.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all those things that you described are just not they're all good, but they're different than the life that you led before for 40 or 50 years, right? They're just different. And the old standby is not different, where you're thinking about food, knowing that, you would get a little bit of I think I think one of the keys to all of this, and I just kind of thought of this, is the idea that the relief is real. And I should probably write that down and use it as a meme and as an understanding for people is the relief from these substances is real. The I think the thing that's missing is the quote unquote buzzy nature of it all.
Mhm.
The you have 2 martinis and you know that you feel different. You can identify pretty clearly from the time that passed in that, 40 or 50 minutes it took to have those 2 martinis. You can feel the relief emotionally. You can feel the change in how you feel. Whereas when you're and this is an interesting fact that I will impart as someone who's had a lot of time without sugar and flour, is that when you're on sugar and flour, you don't feel that day to day. And when you're even in early recovery, you don't feel it day to day. You don't feel like you had that if ingesting you don't people don't consciously connect the idea of 2 martinis with the ideas of a candy bar and a Coke or something like that. But I can tell you unequivocally that when it happens to me and I get it what I call an accidental ingestion of sugar, meaning somebody swears they up and down that they never put sugar in their salad dressing, and whether it's at a restaurant or an individual's house, and that eat a bunch of it, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Whoa, it was like you had that martini or 2." You know what I mean? And this is after you heal up, that sugar really does throw that buzz, and I think the 5-year-old's birthday parties are a perfect example where the kids are hiding behind their mother's leg and, shy and reserved until the cake and ice cream comes out, and then within 20 minutes, it seems like all hell breaks loose in the room because they are bolstered up with an adult size hit of dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, and cannabinoid receptors, right? They're just blasted, like, because they had so much in such a short period of time. And they had, usually unequivocal, unregulated access to the products of sugar and flour, right? On top of what else they could be drinking and whatever, and they're just stoned. They're feeling literally like Superman. They're literally running into walls, and that happens to me when it's only happens about once a year. From a dressing or a gravy or something that you know what was the other time recently I had it? Something you didn't read the label but it does happen, and then you're like and so your body knows this, right? Your body knows that there is a calming, a soothing, a change in how you feel. Not what you think. It's what you feel, you know what I mean? Your body knows that that's access. And again, you've heard me talk about this where the conversion of the deep and mid limbic brains into the thought process of the frontal cortex, that it's struggling to get that feeling back, that soothing back, because it doesn't care. It's not prejudiced in any way, shape, or form. How it can translate it into what is now through the GLP-1s and from what you're describing, be converted into food noise, into thoughts of sugar, right? And thoughts of these products. This is the Well, at its core, the linchpin of our work, it's the whole Rodney Dangerfield, sugar gets no respect. It doesn't get the respect that this is a possible thing. Even though most people have, at least could come from the or the emotional eating world, understood it and why comfort food was named the way it was. It was a slight understanding of it, but not a deep understanding that this is real. This is real, and this is the work that you're going through right now to change those operating systems into what we've traditionally called effort-based dopamine from substance-based dopamine.
Right. Yeah, I see that. And the thing that comes to mind for me is like the instant gratification, like you talked about the buzz, the buzz is missing. And, like I'll I don't have a buzz going on anywhere. So it's like, where's the buzz? Where's the buzz? And I'm not only like with the food, but like I'm not stressing myself out too much with my activity and like, oh my God, I have to go to this, I have to go to that, I have to go to this. And so everything's just very, the other day I asked Siri the definition of serenity, and she said, when there is calm and peace and, oh, what was the other word? It was you. I can't think of the word, but I can't think of it. And I thought about growing up in my family. I'm like, boy, there was no calm, there was no peace, and there was no of this other word. Growing up, even though my mom tried hard to do certain things to keep us manageable, it was just too hard. There were 10 people running around the house all the time. And so, yeah, it's just it's different, and I'm just not feeling that buzz anywhere, and I'm just getting used to it, I guess.
You are just acclimating to the new feeling. And if you really do need some type of soothing, the walking, the yoga, the meditation, the prayer, the manicures, the pedicures, the saunas, there are other things that you have to go do as opposed to what we've used before, and I've used before for sure, is the easy button that is sugar that's always work. It truly is an easy button. It's a
Yeah.
giant easy button. It just push it and you're instantly for 20 minutes now. It doesn't last forever. And you
No,
have
but you can keep eating it. See,
you
you
can
can
reingest, right? You
y
keep every 20 minutes
yeah,
you're having more. Yeah.
yeah, it was immediate, it was instantaneous, and I knew, like, I had a formula, like, when my son passed away and I would work, 60 hours a week as a doctor and a surgeon, but then at night, I would get the kids to bed and I would sit in front of the TV and I knew like what type of sugar to eat for how long and how much of it, and then I could move on to the other sugar, and then I
Mm.
could move on, and then eventually at the end I would get to just pure sugar, like it would be either like Skittles or Runts, those Runts candy that was just,
Okay.
pure sugar,
Right.
and I had this whole ritual that I would do about it,
Right.
and it was very dependable. It was very dependable, yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of addictions have rituals. Pot and their rollings, there's a lot of rituals around addiction. They say that like sex addictions or sex addicts have a ritual. You develop them, and everybody's is different, but everything it works for you. You know what I mean? It's the one, and the one you're describing is interesting because it's almost like the one where people go from beer to whiskey, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, you can do a little beer, you can kinda but then you're gonna need the whiskey, you know what I mean? And a lot of times it's from beer to whiskey to cocaine, you know what I mean? It's like
Mhm.
you're and a lot of evenings, I can attest to that. A lot of evenings progress that way, you know what I mean? It's like, and the same thing here, you described yeah, get started with a little cookies, a little this, a little that, a little ice cream, and then you're right into the straight sugar, everybody's is a little different, and everyone's drug of choice is a little bit different, right? In the sugar world or the flour
Yeah.
food world or the volume world. So
You know, the thing that comes to mind to me when I think back on those binges that I used to do nightly, you know, I did make progress, right? Even though I was binging every 2 to 3 weeks, I used to do it nightly, come to think about it in retrospect. So even every 2 to 3 weeks was progress in the right direction.
Right.
But I always it's a really good thing for me as I'm healing to follow that binge all the way to the end, like how we talk about follow the drink all the way to the end. And like,
Yes.
yeah, for those first 20 minutes, it was good. And then you just amped yourself up again for another 20 minutes and then did it again for another 20 minutes. But eventually I got too full and I would never throw up because I hate doing that.
Mm,
And I knew that that was gonna be the beginning of another whole facet to my eating disorder that I didn't wanna go down. So I would just sit there in physical pain with a really full stomach.
mm.
And then came the misery, right? Then came, like, the poor sleeping and the having to get up at 5 a.m. and go work, a 14-hour day or 24 or whatever it was. And, the misery around it and just living your life waiting for you to be able to get to your next binge, your next sugar high. I mean, that's all that you basically lived for. And when I think about that and follow it all the way to the end and how miserable that was and how unhappy I was and basically how unhealthy it made me, then it's not so glamorous anymore.
Right. Well, that's an excellent technique and an excellent thing to bring up at this juncture. It's exactly how it's done. How are you going to feel the next day when you can't re-ingest or don't want to re-ingest? You're going to be depleted of dopamine, serotonin, you're going to be really depleted. You're going to feel hungover. I mean, I can't even imagine trying to do your job before every morning. It must have had to been, you go that way, and then you have to get the coffee and the tea and everything to go to work because otherwise you wouldn't want to get out of bed and you just whatever you have a headache and you'd be like feeling blah and brain fogged and whatever. So then you got to do the caffeine and whatever. So yeah, it's a good technique, but honestly, you don't aren't able to get to that technique without a couple of months. The first few months, you don't have the space. You do want the instant gratification. You know what I mean? You're not healed up at all. And you're like, you just want it 24/7, and then it starts to quiet, and you can have a minute or 2 to think when you're driving by the convenience store or whatever. You say, "Nah, I don't know, I'm 2 months in, I don't need that," and you really mean it, and it's real. Whereas before, it would be almost like the car had its own homing device and just
Mhm.
pull right in.
Yeah, and then sometimes it would be 2 days later, when I would have these big binges. It'd be 2 days later, and I'd think, "Gosh, I wonder why I did that. I wonder what happened that just threw me off like that." Or, was it just white knuckling it for so much time that I just couldn't do it anymore? Or was it something, 3 different things happened right in a row that triggered me that just sent me into a tailspin? Or,
Well,
and
you
I
and
couldn't
I have dissected that a couple of times in real time here.
we did with my mother, remember that
That was
one?
s wild, man, just wild. It took us the whole hour to get to the point you just kinda off the cuff said, "Well, I did visit my mother this morning," and I'm like, "What?" I mean, it's like, you're like, "I went to the gym, I lost 6 pounds, I'm feeling good," and then I head to the getting place, the store or whatever, and I can't figure it out. You can't figure it out. Why would you want to? You had 2 months at that time too, I think, or something. You had a long time, and you're like, and then we get to the thing where your mother had denigrated, even though she was like half, not even there with Alzheimer's. She kept that part of her personality, and it still stung. And you just
Yeah.
intellectually, you buried it, right? And intellectually, you went to the gym, did a weigh-in, you'd lost weight, but in emotionally, it was still percolating there, and then that we figured it out. We figured out why, and there was couple other times, but that was the most dramatic.
Yeah, that was wild. I should find that episode. I don't know how
People
I'm
don't
gonna
have
track it down.
time to unless they have a support group, unless they have, like, like people guides of people who've been there, they they literally I always hated this phrase in recovery. It's like a built-in forgetter. I always I think it's a dumb phrase, but it's adequate and acts it's accurate. You know what I mean? It's like you have this built-in forgetter because you know you want to do what you want to, you want your body to feel the feeling of the ingestation, whatever that is, the substance, and you forget the pain and you forget the commitment and you forget the
Mhm.
this. It's like you just do it
Mm.
anyway. And yeah, that's
Yeah. But this process is, doing it with food, like and dealing with an addiction to sugar and, the food aspect of it is so tricky. And we talk about this in the rooms, right? Like alcohol is so much easier. You just don't drink it, but you have to figure out how to eat a healthy diet, one, two, three times a day or whatever, unless you're doing some fasting. But it's progress. The way that I've progressed and grown into my healing has been like slow, like it's on God's timeline and I want it on my timeline. And it's always like, 3 steps forward, a step back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. It's like this front and back thing. And I just want people who are listening to understand that that's really normal.
yeah.
That's how you do it. You just have to keep doing it. Like when I used to go over to see my mother and she would say these mean things to me and give me these looks that just, would crush me, as a 60-year-old woman. I used to eat sugar before I went, and then I would see her, and then I would go eat more sugar. There was a 7-Eleven, like, right down the road from where she lives. And
Mm,
then eventually I got to where I would go to Del Taco, and I would get a taco salad, and I would eat that before I would go see her, trying to get my and then I remember one time I went and saw her, and I was only there for, like, an hour and a half, and then I went and bought another taco salad because I needed to eat as soon as I got done seeing her. But at
right.
least I moved away from the sugar and I moved into the taco salad. And then eventually, I got to where I only had to do it either before or after. And then eventually I got to where I didn't have to do it, and her, senility kind of progressed along that route too. So that now
Yeah.
she's totally out of it. She just doesn't really understand. She's happy to see me and sad to see me go, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So it's, working out really well that way. Although the
The
last time I saw her, she was looking at me a certain way, and I think she wanted to comment on the size, on how big I was, but she couldn't get the words out.
It's funny, the look.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, this sober dissection of the past behavior, I think is important. You're starting to see the patterns that continue to persist, underlying the need for ingestion of the substance, right? You're starting to see what patterns were there. And most people never raise sugar to the conscious enough level that you just did in the dissection of the visits, right? They don't kind of think, well, I was this, I was that, the husband was an ass, the boss was a jerk. They're not thinking about that part of it. They're just captured by the cravings. That's another one I think I should be using. Captured by the cravings, right? They're captured by the body's however it does it, still one of my biggest thought problems, captured by the feeling that you want something in your mouth that is this or that, sweet or crunchy or whatever it is, whatever your thing is, and that if there's an urgency to it, right? A weird urgency. And it's like most people don't take the time to do what you just did in the dissection of the reality of it, right? Even though they've made a commitment, say in the early days of a detox or a change process, they said, I'm going to do this for 30 days. It's worth the experiment. I'm educated. I'm committed. They don't take the time. We should have post relapse autopsies of that, like we did. You know what I mean? We should have a post. relapse, okay, where were you? What was going on in your life?
Mhm,
How
mhm.
were you feeling? That how were you feeling throws people off, right? It's like, what the hell's that got anything to do with it? They're like telling me, right? It's telling me all the time. What does that got to do with it? But it has everything to do with it.
It does, and that's where the word that comes to mind for me is awareness, right? You
Yeah,
have to be aware of all these things that are going on to cause you to do this binging on sugar
right.
in order to figure out how to create a solution for it. But, awareness is the beginning of the healing.
Yes, yes. Which brings us to your training now as metabolic health practitioner and my saying that sounds harsh, but 99% of the people who end up on my doorstep do not have the mental capacity to do this processing because their brain is controlled, literally like a cyborg, controlled by the substance they've been using. And, the science now is very clear. The dopamine dysregulation, the downregulation of dopamine receptors, the scans, the shrinking brain. You need to get where you are to get, literally a year working towards getting to it. All of the times where you thought you failed, you had healed in the gaps, you had healed in the time. And your brain is healed now, or healing enough to take the time to say, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. Let me call somebody. I don't want to do that. Let me keep driving. You know what I mean? Your
Mhm.
brain genuinely, this is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to me in my career. And I think for the world for the next 20 or 30 years is this metabolic psychiatry stuff, this healing of the brain. We always knew all this crap caused fatty liver, but we just now are either accepting the idea or, providing studies about the idea that, the brain can be changed. The most exciting, I don't know if you saw this study, it came out the other day, a peer reviewed study about ketogenic therapy for psychosis or bipolar or something. And, really positive success rates from diet change, right? And this is, I mean, it's arguably worse in a lot of ways than quote unquote addiction or, behavior that's, damaging mostly to the individual, but like it keeps coming too. It's not like it's new. There's more and more every day in this metabolic psychiatry world. So the healing of the brain physically is important as well as the emotional understanding of how this is being processed in your brain. It's not really being processed intellectually in the frontal cortex. It's being processed at a deeper level in the limbic and midbrains that it's trying to get its soothing in.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's really important, at least for me, that, I'm on this ketogenic diet and lifestyle where I'm watching my carbohydrate load and really trying to keep it low, like somewhere between 20 and 50 grams a day, and being able to heal and get your brain to where it can think differently and process differently and
Right.
have this awareness and look at what's going on and get the support and connection that you need before you go and get the ingestion into your body. And
Yeah.
that's taken me 2.5 years. I mean, it's gonna be 3 years in September that I figured out that the all of the junky food I was eating, the keto friendly food, the
Mm,
sugar, the the chemicals, the peanut butter cups, all this low carb, keto friendly stuff.
yeah.
I figured out that I was eating it addictively. And then that's when I realized, gosh, I think I have an issue with sugar. And that started my whole journey. You know? And, like, when I think back and I'm like, "Well, gee, you did binge on massive amounts of sugar, like, every night for, 15 years. I mean, you don't think you have a problem?" You never even looked at it. I never even paid attention.
Right.
I mean, like you said, it was working. I had an insane life and it was working.
Does work.
It does work till it doesn't work. And,
Yeah.
and I have to tell you, Mike, that part of me is like, God, if I wasn't so metabolically sick, I don't know that I would be so motivated to get off of the sugar. I want to live.
Yep.
I don't want to die from this disease. I don't want Alzheimer's. I don't want, all of this metabolic stuff. I wanted to get off my Cymbalta. I don't want to have to treat my depression. I can do it with my low carb diet.
So one term that these new studies are bringing out, and one I want to like emphasize and re-emphasize, and an idea for you is that this term of therapeutic ketosis or a therapeutic keto diet, right? Which I think the, threshold is 10 carbs a day, 10 whatever it is, 10, not 20 or 30. And Dr. Boz has some super interesting protocols where you test your ketones every morning with the pee strips. And I think she does the finger prick then too, but like I was mentioning exactly kind of what we're talking about, the behavioral change and this kind of therapeutic ketosis is what the diet that they put the bipolar or the depressed people or whatever, the psychosis people on. And, every freaking day I see somebody new in my feed who has walked out of ketosis or psychosis or bipolar or something from this therapeutic ketosis. And again, for me, the intersection of this behavioral change process and the addiction change process is just a no-brainer, just a perfect marriage made in heaven that if you're going to quit even anything, alcohol or drugs or whatever, the same things are happening in the brain, and that the diet change will put somebody where you are, which is, 2.5 years of healing. Largely, you had large, gaps and some relapses, but you healed up a lot. And each time you got stronger mentally, like physically, mentally, like not necessarily emotionally, mentally, but maybe both, right? But
Mhm.
your brain is stronger. It's better. It's healed. It's like your liver getting rid of the fatty liver. Our head coach, Badana, lost 60 pounds and put fatty liver in remission, one of the body's organs, right? And this is one of the body's organs that now they're starting to understand through scans and behavior that it is also changing and getting better when there's no or is very low or non-existent carbohydrates. So this is important. I mean, super important. Really.
Yeah, and it is an exciting time, right? We're like on the cusp of everybody figuring it out, and
Yeah.
it's an exciting time to be in metabolic health, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Metabolic Mind is a wonderful place to go from the
Yeah.
Bazooki group that
Yeah.
teaches a lot of people. If you just go on YouTube and type in Metabolic Mind, Brett Shearer is there, and he does these wonderful videos with Georgia Ede, and they do the mailbag video where they answer all these questions, and I've been listening to those. It's really a lot of fun and very informative and very exciting.
It's a very exciting time. I mean, it really is. And again, this intersection of David Wiss used to have this, he had a company kind of, not that he's forsaken it, but he would go into treatment centers and change. That was the name of his company, like something in like nutrition in recovery. That was the name of it. And he kind of got it intuitively years ago. Right. And I mean, the crap they feed you in treatment centers is damn near as bad as the stuff they give you in hospitals, right? There has to be, I think, this integration of the diet part of any kind of substance addiction recovery, not just sugar and flour. It's,
Yeah,
and the metabolic psychiatry movement is proving that out.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But, it's gonna take time. I don't know when it'll mainstream.
Yeah. That's gonna be a while. It's gonna take
Yeah.
But we wanna be on the cutting edge of that, you know, we wanna be on the cutting edge of helping all these groups, like you mentioned Metabolic Mind, and Metabolic Collective is another one, I think it's metaboliccollective.org, so there's other and they have more different things, groups and whatever, so, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on out there, and it really follows very clearly with your recovery personally, you know?
Yeah, it does. And I'm just glad that we're doing these videos, which, are hopefully getting people to think about things, to be aware, to go and explore more, to hear my story and, have some faith that they can keep going
Yeah.
and do what they need to do to get themselves, metabolically healthier and live a good life.
Yeah, this is a beatable thing. Obviously, we've had all these success stories at No Sugar Nation, and you're only, as Jack Nicholson said in that movie, you're just inches from a clean getaway.
All right, everybody, just keep working at it. Keep listening, keep learning, keep being aware, keep working at it, and
Right,
we'll keep making videos to prompt you to do those things.
right.
All right, thank you so much, Mike.
All right, you take care.
All right, you too. Bye.